Okay, I'm here with Dr. Ross Cooper, and Ross and I have some shared history in the sense that we both come from Chipinga, or Chipinge as it is in Zimbabwe now. Uh, but I'm a little bit older than Ross, so we didn't grow up together in the same sort of era, but we grew up together in the same town, and that in itself is quite remarkable when you think about it. Because I mean,
Mhm.
Chipinga is a really small little dorp, and Ross, lovely to see you, brother. You're in the UK, I'm in the Philippines. So it's nighttime here, as you can see out the window of my apartment, but it's very much daytime where you are. And
Oh, yeah.
Ross, why don't we start with you maybe giving us, a little bit of your childhood background and where you went to school. And, I'm not
Mm.
exactly sure what it is you want to talk about, but I know it's going to be interesting because you've written many books, and I'm going to
Yeah.
be putting details of all of those books in the description. So if any of you are interested, you can access Ross's books, and Ross and I communicate on a regular basis, and I've always found his comments to be most interesting. So over to you, my brother.
Okay. Thank you, John. It's a great pleasure to be on this platform, and certainly, I really interested you and all the listeners on my experiences in Chipinga. Um, but first of all, before I start, I just wanted to, bring back some memories. Got my
Rhodesian rugby
rugby,
jersey.
drink coaster, my Zimbabwean flag. And of course, my favorite was cream soda, cream soda bottle. So
Yeah, yeah.
that's still with me. Yeah. So, yeah.
We all
Well,
part of the diaspora. Eh?
yes, that's it. That's it. So basically, I was born to my parents in Salisbury, and that was where in the Lady Chancellor Maternity Hospital.
Same as me.
Yeah, and that's now part of Perinatal Hospital, and we all lived in Greendale, and therefore only left to Chipinga when I was extremely young indeed. Um, so what I'll do is I'll give you a bit of a spiel about my Greendale memories, and then go on to the Chipinga. So as I was very little, I do remember some things about Greendale, like the swimming pool and wearing a vest, those white vests with holes in them. The large balls I used to play with, and chucking the ball at the silver wire fences, the fencing around the property. I do remember the rain showers and all the water-filled channels, carrying the tadpoles and the frogs. I used to try and catch them. And perhaps that's where my love of the flora and fauna was born, because my father liked animals in the sense that he had a caged, tame vervet monkey called Henry. And this monkey would come out and could feed it and play with it. He had a lot of guinea pigs as well. And I remember Bentley, the cross Alsatian dog, um, had a dock tail, a short tail. Now, Bentley ended up going with us to Chipinga. But I also remember my long blonde hair and my visits with my grandmother, my paternal grandmother, to the Red Cross in Salisbury. And she used to drive me in a Ford Cortina. I remember sitting in the back enjoying the views. So by this time, of course, by the time I was born in the 70s, the war had already started, but yet my father still decided to take a transfer to Chipinga. A number of reasons, because he liked the outdoor life, but he also grew up in the area in Umtali. He went to Umtali Boys High School. Um, so it was like he was transferred there to a government house, and we moved there in 1973. And I
Mm.
remember going down there actually in the back of this long station wagon, my parents in the front, and it was an incredibly long drive, for a young boy like myself. But on arrival at the veterinary house, where my father was stationed, I remember the long red stoop. And this was on Moody Street. And it was so long. When I looked at it as a child, I'd never seen anything like it. So immediately I started, skidding along it. Because the stoops those days they used to be polished red, and you could see your reflection in the stoop. Um, Lovely, some of them were green, some of them were black, beautifully polished. And the the driveway though was rather concentric. I had to gaze down onto this driveway. There's a big sloping tiered path up the side of the house to the front door. But at the back of that, there was also the steep stairway up to the back door of the kitchen. And I checked this garden, and the garden was tiered, different levels because it was sloping down towards the veldt. So it was an edge of the veldt of Chipinga Moody Street, and it was sloping down towards the veldt. It had a massive cypress hedge around it, and it did the border the veldt. So with time, as we stayed there, I noticed lots of antelope footprints or spoor, and even leopard spoor in the
Mm.
soil of the vegetable garden. So yeah, they were coming at night, and sometimes baboons as well. The vegetable garden was huge. It was like I could go in there and never be found again. But it wasn't that big. But as a child, you think everything's big, but it was really like a forest. I remember the chicken hook and all the eggs we ate. Beautiful, fresh eggs, every day. Beautiful. And I remember the Christmas rooster. So just before Christmas, the big rooster was executed, and we ate the rooster. And my father is sort of taught me that to get it tender, you have to chuck in a whole carrot and a whole onion uh, into the pot with the rooster to get it all tender and soft. Oh, it was delicious. Um, so we ate a lot of our vegetables from the garden. The fruit trees were innumerable: pears, um, apricots, mulberries, and there's also the avocado pear tree. One of which I planted from a pip, and it's grown into an enormous one. It's still there to this day. So as a child, I kind of was quickly enrolled in nursery school, and I couldn't wait to finish and get outdoors into exploring, etc. And there's so much to do in the garden with my friends, like climbing trees, making mud clods, and throwing them at each other. And you know, our t-shirts used to be splattered with all the mud. Uh, walking in the veldt. I used to do that when my parents weren't around because I wasn't really allowed to because of the war was on as well. But nevertheless, I used to go hiding in the cypress bushes, climbing trees, and other things I used to do is I used to, you know, small things like get a little stone, drop it in a cream soda bottle, and watch all the bubbles fizz up. Um, and it's ever such a tiny stone. And then starting nursery school, the basic reading, writing, numbers, and then kicking a soccer ball across the garden. I remember that quite well. Most of the children in my nursery school were farmers' kids, and some were of English descent, some of Afrikaans descent, and inevitably there was also the bullying that started there. And I remember being bullied as well, the paint fights and that. We had a very old nursery school teacher, a lady. I can't quite remember her surname, but I do remember her bespectacled, curly hair. And at that nursery school, I became friends with Gregory Izzet, Carl van Rooyen, John Henry, Melanie Payne, and Betsy Kloppers, to name a few. There were loads more, of course.
Was Doc Coshelton and his son still there when you were there? Because I was also in Chipinga in 1973.
Yes. Dr. Coshelton was certainly still there.
Okay.
But unfortunately, one of his sons, I don't know if it's the son you
Yeah,
mean,
one of
was
his sons was
shot
killed in the war. Yeah,
in the war. As a Grey Scout, he was shot in the head.
that's
Yeah.
correct. Yeah, yeah.
No, he wasn't there, actually. He'd been killed, yeah. But I do remember the doctor. And in fact, I'm going to talk about him when I was sick in a bit. Um, but us Rhodesian children, we were very, forthcoming and outgoing and friendly, and it was nothing for me to jump on a bicycle and ride up the high street, the main road. To think about all the health and safety these days, in the West, it's just absolutely ridiculous. Because I had to walk to school when I got to the junior school. I'll tell you about that. I had to strap there and then walk back. It was a long walk, and I often walk through the veld to school and walk back through the veld back, come through the back fence garden up back into the house. Of course, school and nursery school, it started at 7:30 in the morning. That's when lessons started, and you had to be there before that. So I'd get up at 6 o'clock in the morning, no problem. There's nothing like watching the sun in Chipinga rising. It's absolutely out of this world. You just as you look as you're in the town, you can see it slopes down, but then it goes up to a little hillock beyond the dam. You can see the huge orange sunrise. The bird life and the insects were phenomenal, absolutely astonishing. Something I'll never forget. And the smell of the leaves and the rain, the crickets, the chameleons. There's just so many things to remember and see. So it wasn't long before it was announced by my father that I'll be sent to Chipinga Junior School. Oh, I didn't like that news. I thought, oh my goodness. But however, fortunately, it was with the same group of friends in my class from nursery school that I then joined KG1. We only had one class in each stream. There wasn't an A or a B stream. So I didn't want to attend that day. And I remember after my father announced it, I ran away and hid in a cardboard box. And this cardboard box was in the passage. It was the boxes from their furniture that they brought back after a while, came down, took quite a while, from Greentown. And they couldn't find me, but my father soon sort of realized where I was and tapped on the box. Out you come. He has your school uniform. So, of course, inevitably the crying and, didn't want to go. And however, after I arrived there, I was greeted by my new teacher, Mary, now Carshalton, Mary Carshalton.
Okay.
Mary Sheard was, I think, and she had long blonde hair, and she quickly allayed my fears. And within, within half an hour, I was loving it. I remember the classroom with wooden chairs, the ink pots. They still had ink pots with that fountain pen. You dip the fountain pen in the ink pot, and you write it. They still had those. But we, of course, had to use pencils. But we always wanted to put our finger in the pot. But after about 7 months, they removed those pots. The Rhodesia government removed them and gave all students biros. Um,
Biros.
Biros,
Nobody,
yeah.
nobody uses that word anymore.
And yeah, I remember the sharpener in the front, and would love to get our pencils sharpened on the teacher's desk and rub off all the chalk on the board, and. So whilst there, I came to realize that there was a dentist that was sent by the Rhodesian government to the school once a year, and it was proper. They'd spend an hour per student, so the dentist would be there for months. Not like here, 10 minutes per patient. There, they did a proper job, and he came with an X-ray machine, could do anything, fillings, a lot. But we weren't allowed to go and stay at the dentist. And if we did, we'd be sent to the headmaster. And one day that happened, I got caught. But as she was shouting at us, I slipped behind a chair on the desk, and she didn't notice me then. And as soon as her back was turned, I slipped out the classroom and escaped the headmaster. um, but going back to the school, I remember the hall movies. We used to go into the hall once a week and watch these movies. It was incredible. And the sound was clear, man, clear. Remember my hats, car keys, the tires, brown shoes, homework. We had no swimming pool then. We had to swim in the municipal pool, including our galas. And occasionally I got dropped and picked off by my mother in her Renault 10, or my father would in his veterinary cheetah. Now that's an army issue vehicle, as you know, with curved sides and thick bulletproof glass. And I didn't really like going in it because he would rev the engine so loud that all the students would be checking me as I climbed out the back. um, I remember at school the marbles, digging furrows and the holes, for chucking the marbles in, because they put like you put two marbles in a hole and people would be chucking the marbles, and if they struck it and they get the marbles, the rest you keep. The stacking of the marbles and capturing the expended marbles in your spread legs, and you just capture them all. So if you're lucky, you could double or triple the marbles you lost. Forget there was no internet or cell phones or anything like that. So we were spending our time outdoors, and what a wonderful experience. And the standard five boy, he checked me out because I was right in the front with my marble, and I put in one in the one furrow, which was 1 foot. And he said, no, 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 you bring your marbles with me. And he took me right to the back and he set them. And we made, I think it was 35 marbles for a stack of 6. And I was so grateful. And he said, no, 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 you keep them all. They're yours, man. And, the Rhodesian spirit was just wonderful. Everyone was so friendly. And I also remember being protected by a blonde Afrikaans girl. And she was in standard 6 against bullies in a line. Now, we were lining up to get our milk, quarter cent, half cent milks or caramellas at break time. And she went ballistic and she threatened to beat up the bullies if they ever touched me again. And I never had any problems after that. Um, and I wish I could, I've often thought about, I wish I could have in my younger days sort of, met up with her again in my, young 20s, but sadly no. The Afrikaans kids, I remember there were lots of them at school. I remember they used to say, especially the girls say, kom, slow coach, you know. And I had friends in the Willemse family, and we used to go out to their Volkswagen house, about 35-minute drive from Chipinga. I also had a collection of silkworms, spiders, as part of my pets, apart from dogs and that. But I looked after these, and one of my silkworm projects got a prize at school. So I also remember for parties, birthday parties, I'd be given pen knives. Oh, the Rhodesian pen knives were out of this world beautifully. The beautiful plastic designs, just out of this world. And, you could cut your biltong or your fruit with that. And birthdays, and then Father Christmas being delivered usually in the yellow fire engine, the Land Rover, and that would normally be to either the school or to the sports club. I remember the Army helicopter displays on the school fields, and it was only the last grade or standard, should I say, that were allowed into the chopper, and it took off with them inside. And then on that field, I remember the team of soldiers coming racing down, and they were a mortar team. And they set up this mortar in the tube, and then they fired the mortars high, and I'd take them high, high. They're tiny, and they went so high you could barely see them. They came rushing down with that sound. And then right next to, or even hitting the drums that had been placed on the end of the field. They were obviously blanks, but my goodness, this was fascinating. We used to have quite a lot of displays. And as the war got worse and worse towards the end of the 70s, the soldiers had to, I suppose maybe the RAR, they had bunkers dug at the end of each of the fields, because there've been so many attacks. What else could I think of? Okay, so also I went on farm visits and I stayed, as I said, with the Willemses, and my friends were Jani and Yaki Willemse. And we had a great time, and we were sitting at the top there of that Volkswagen house, checking or pervading their orchards and their fields of crops. He used to land his light aircraft on the driveway, and it park it in a garage right up at the house. Amazing. Also, I had sleepovers in the town itself with Gregory Izzet, and usually a weekend sleepover. And also on the Turner's farm. Sadly, Mr. Turner got killed in an ambush. Terrible. I actually shared a sort of a next table next to me with his son in school. Oh, just terrible. But as the war escalated, every day I walked to school, I used to see the convoy vehicles coming out from the police, the BSAP police area there, because they came just around the school, didn't they? And then onto the high street, the main road. And as I used to walk to school, I used to often see the army helicopter racing in very, very fast and low, incredibly fast, as it landed at Chipinga Hospital with the wounded troopies. And a bit more of that in a second. But you mentioned Dr. Harshelton. Sure, I remember him. Remember his bespectacled, serious look and his gentle hands. He always had a very, very smart white lab coat that had creases ironed, and properly ironed, like starch, I presume. And he was a very good doctor because he used to visit homes. If you're sick at home, you didn't have to go to the hospital. He would come to your house, and treat you in your bed. And then, though, however, when my tonsils got infected, I do remember the pain and couldn't talk. I had to go into hospital, and he was the one who operated. How he did it, I don't know, because he was the sole doctor and surgeon there. And he was like 24/7 doctor. I remember being given ether gas. There's no injection of anesthetic. I know this gas mask over my nose. And I held my breath, and then the nurse said, "Oh, don't hold your breath." She sort of gently squeezed my wrist. Just breathe in as much as you can. But I didn't like the smell. It's too sweet, that ether. Oh. And then she said, keep on breathing in and then out and count to 10. By 8, I was gone. I was gone. I was knocked out at 8. And I woke up with, the stitch. I could feel the stitches in the back of my throat, And all I was given was soup, cold soup. I couldn't have warm, cold soup and dry bread, which I dipped in the soup, and ice cream to obviously give me a chance to get those tonsil wounds healed. That's the only time, but whilst I was there, that's when I saw the helicopter landing at night, and it got worse, and we weren't allowed to look. But of course, I looked between the Venetian blinds, because the chopper had landed just outside, and I could see them bringing out the wounded troopies, the blood and everything. It was just the drips, racing with them at top speed to Dr. Harshelton and the surgery ward at the end of the passage. It was a very long passage at that Chipinga hospital. Now, when I was there, in those days, the nurses and matrons were quite strict, and I didn't want to take off my clothes and jump in the bath. So she said, if you don't, I'm gonna, clap you. And I didn't. So then I got a clap, and I took off my clothes and then jumped in the bath, and it was all right from there. Same with at school, it was nothing for a teacher to clap you as well, and that's discipline, or get caned, it was nothing like that at all. Or get your hair pulled,
Yeah.
If you swore, they gave you chalk to eat, or soap, to eat soap. The thing is though, my father didn't really want to, he was reluctant to join the Rhodesian army, and they came for him, eh? They said, look, we're going to arrest you because of your persistent refusal. I remember these military police, there was 3 of them, and they took him away. And he quickly agreed, and he then did his national service, 6 months training. And he was a vet, but he was placed in looking after the animals, so he told me, the horses and the dogs, but also as a cook, a barracks cook, and also guarding the convoys towards the dip tanks, for the cattle dip tanks. He also had to do convoy duty between Chipinga and Umtali. So he was a driver, and I remember when you come back in his uniform, and I used to admire this so much, he'd give me his unloaded gun. Well, the FN was too heavy for me, but he gave me a 9mm with the, obviously empty. And I'd carry that back down the stairs into the house, and all the nursery school children would be looking at me as if I was Sylvester Stallone. Because I was now carrying my father's gun. My mom also got to work with the BSAP, and she worked there on the radio, and I'll be talking about that in a bit.
Mm.
But if we go back to the war now, I remember as it escalated, there was a variety of attacks. You know, the Alexander's farm got attacked.
Yes, yes,
The Glenny baby got bayoneted to
that's
death,
right. Yeah.
chucked across the veranda. We were
Natasha
very
Glenny.
scared. Yes. And I've actually been in touch with her father last year. And
Ham Glenny and I were at school together in Plumtree School.
yeah, you know,
Yeah.
just terrible. It's such an unnecessary brutality. But the war was escalating. And then, unfortunately, my parents split up. And I was placed into, as the war escalated, as a boarder into Chipinga Junior School. Now, if you think about discipline there, my God, it's like military, you know.
Mm.
You had to be up at the crack of dawn and you had to have made your bed, inspections, and slightest crease, and you get a whack with a slipper. But whilst I was asleep there, fast asleep, the Makandanga dadas decided to come down, and Makandangas set up a mortar and start mortaring the town. And they did so a lot. So many explosions by what I mean. However, I was still fast asleep. You know what woke me up? It wasn't the mortars exploding around the school and one of them hit the fence at the school and around the police camp. It wasn't that. You know what actually woke me up? It was a cold. I felt I was dreaming, like I was bouncing around in a car, and there was this cold thing across my cheek. I thought, why is that so cold? And then I moved my hand to touch it, and then suddenly I woke up, and there was this troopy running with me. And that was his FN barrel. He was sprinting with me to the underground bunker. And that was a part of the school. And he raced down the stairs. And I remember when he put me down, I put my foot straight into a trough of water down there. But I couldn't believe. And I remember I was getting scared. And I kept on looking at the troopy. And he was wide-eyed and like, but keen sense, wide-eyed. And I remember his cap. I remember his gun at the ready, you know. And he was protecting us, you know. And I admired that. The explosions were numerous around. You could actually feel them in the bunker. It was really scary. And apart from the puddles of water, the detonations, the town siren ringing across the whole town. And I remember the Alloy helicopters racing around at that time looking for the gang. I later heard that they were tracked down and eliminated. But you know, fancy doing that.
Mm.
And I wouldn't be here if one of those mortars had hit the dormitory where I was sleeping. So I had a lot of close shaves, therefore, during the war. But before I talk about the war, I just want to talk about my bicycle. Now, we used to wear Bata flip-flops. And, you know, if you got your flip-flops and you're sweating and then suddenly your flip-flop slides a bit whilst it's on the pedal, and then next thing it's in the front spokes. And before you know it, head over heels, boom, straight onto the tarmac. So that happened to me and banged my head. It wasn't that bad, but I remember banging my head slightly dazed. But what was more painful was my foot stuck in the spokes. And the next door lady came and sort of rescued me, but I was all right, you know. That was the only, apart from me nearly riding through a giveaway sign, because my friend had just taken off on the other side of the road, and this Renault 7 came racing through, and she was going too fast, and she slammed on her brakes and then said to me, "STOP means stop." And she took off. And this was the lady that worked at the veterinary surgery, um, who accidentally let off a round in that veterinary surgery and was dismissed as a consequence. I don't know what she was playing at, but she fired this revolver in there and could have easily killed someone. Maybe it was an accident. Well, I do remember the bullet hole in the ceiling. Remember, many of the houses there had tin roofs, tin roofs. Going back to the close shaves, though, there was an attack on my mom in the house whilst I slept. And that's when my father was away in the army, and the attacker identified himself as a Zanla, yeah, from Mozambique. But he didn't attack us that were sleeping, the children. He just attacked my mum. Yeah. And they were actually coming into the town and attacking, and that same guy attacked another woman next door. When the police eventually found him hiding out in a tool shed in the Guard Force commander's house, and he had now by now left that house, and they took him to ask him questions. He started running, and they shot him dead. So that attacker was killed by the police. And I have to talk about the war because it's part of my experience and it's the truth as well. You know, we had a war and there were two sides fighting. Yes, the Rhodesian soldiers and Zanda Zipra. I'm not taking any sides. I'm just saying the facts that I experienced. So therefore, there was also a waiting Zanla ambush on a convoy to Charlie, which we were in, and they were very well positioned indeed. And they were on a very steep incline. So, as it goes upwards towards Christmas Pass, they were going to shoot down into our roofs. And that would have been, well, that would have been terrible because there would have been no place for us to escape. But they were distracted by a lone hyena with AR on board. And they opened up on this hyena, who then, to their surprise, retaliated and they just gapped it. Another close shave was a landmine, but we had gone over it, but in the Peugeot station wagon, yeah. We didn't detonate it. It was detonated by a tractor just behind us. My goodness, I just can't, if I think about it, how close that was. Then, probably the worst of all, though, was the RPG-7 fired at Hugh Fennell's farm. And he had a coffee farm, and we were there on Christmas Eve. And my mother just told us at 6 o'clock at night to get into bed. And I remember climbing into the spring bed, and then I heard the bang, and then the RPG just came over. And I remember the sound of a jet engine that was going so fast, it screamed over. It was so close that Providence or the hand of God lifted it. Perhaps as the fins opened, it lifted slightly, and it just missed the roof, just missed. The people, the revelers there all drinking, quickly sobered up, and they just opened up, shooting all around the farmhouse. And just on the way that the gang just fired another RPG into the farm store, and that saddened me because I used to buy all my clothes there, sweets, for example,
Yeah.
with one Rhodesian dollar. I bought a whole wardrobe of clothes, shoes, socks. Things were like in 2 cents, 2 cents a shirt, those days. It was amazing, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. But going back to the close shaves as well, as the mortars were landing, they narrowly, it was 1978, and they narrowly missed the police camp, and I think they're also firing as well to the Fire Force base, certainly at the school. And it's kind of like the attacks got worse because Chipinga Sports Club was hit, and it was mainly from the golf course side. Once there was an ambush there or an attack from the golf course, and they became so dangerous you could not go onto the golf course without an armed escort. My father liked golf, and many people just packed it up. And I remember him stopping because, and of course, we lived within close distance of the Guard Force commander's house. It was Colin Fisher, but his Guard Force camp, was at the back of that golf course. And it's surprising how the Zanla combatants came and attacked the sports club within a stone's throw of the Guard Force camp. And this was in daylight as well. So, just beyond me that. They became more and more daring. Also, another close shave I had was rifle range ricochets, because at the various rifle range competitions, it was the citizens of Chipinga and the army and the visitors. They used to have trophies, etc. They used to have major ricochets, and I remember one narrowly missing me. because I would like to, I got bored after a while and just started moving around in the bush, you know. They became they became a sad situation in that there was a funeral every week of someone we knew, especially 78, 79. And I can only put it towards the fact that I'm still here by being protected by the hand of God and his angels, because I wouldn't be here. That this I was so close for me, at least 6 times being killed. I mean, it was this close, like a millimeter close, if you think about it as a distance. Um, and you mentioned that Anglican church. That's the church I went to for services, and when I was a boarder, we had to go there for Sunday school. And indeed, I was christened there. But that was soon after I arrived as a small little boy in Chipinga. I was christened there. And it was actually by your father because he signed my christening certificate.
Really?
Ah, yeah, it's Van Zale, yeah. Yeah. And I've got a few more things to speak about. It's just such an interesting experience. And thank you for introducing my books, because I've written a lot about this in incredible detail in my books. And my pride and joy is the moldings of Chipinga, which is the only book available on Chipinga that I know of in the world. And I've included all this experience. Um, it took me 8 months to write it, you know. Um, I've written many others which I've sent to you, and you can have a look. And
Mm.
please put them on the video.
Yeah, will do.
I admired with pride the Rhodesian army vehicles, and as a boy, you always like the army, no matter where you are in the world. The aircraft, the camouflage attire, the FNs, the Uzis, the 9mm, the communist weapons, AKs, for example, grenades, convoys, machine guns, the machine guns on the back of the convoy vehicles, the Mazda vehicles. Um, I often wondered, how can that Mazda vehicle escape an ambush? Because it looked so flimsy, you know. And the machine gun at the back used to stand before, I remember quite clearly, because I used to walk to school and they passed me without any protection. Until one day there was an ambush and they were killed. So they put metal protection around it. Um, but what I used to be also do as a African boy is I used to get a piece of card, cut it, and then get a clothes peg and put it on my bicycle spokes. So when I rode the bicycle, usually on the front wheel, to make a sound.
Yeah, yeah.
And that, yeah, and back at home, carrying around my pelican and bicycle tube catapult. Now I was friendly with the maids' children, and they taught me how to make a catapult. Cut the V-shaped wood from a bit of cypress and trim, and then usually with a panga, you know, trim it with a panga, and then you get the old bicycle tube, and they taught me how to do it. Eh? Yeah, I became an expert, and I used to make these long. And of course, you know, we used to try and kill birds, you know, because we used to eat them as well, you know, as boys, you know.
Hmm.
I look back on it and I wish I hadn't, but I have to admit that I did kill some birds and eat them. Um, the wire car that the maid's son showed me how to make, you know, that was with the wheels turning, and you could steer it as well with a connected, you know, with a long
Yeah,
wire as
yeah.
well. I looked at pride at the BSAP constables, you know, and they were very smart. Oh my goodness. I think, in my opinion, I've seen lots of police all over the world. When I say that, I've been to Europe, I've been to USA, Australia, Brazil, but our BSAP constables were by far the smartest,
Mm,
and
mm.
still, in my opinion, were the smartest. The aircraft at the aerodrome, I mean, I just told you I used to go and see them, but just to check them in the hangars there, just to go and check them parked was fascinating. Then I used to play a lot with the garden boys and nannies' children, and you know, it was nothing like any racial problem, you know, and just
Yeah.
and no, I'd go down personally with them into Gaza, you know, the Gaza township there or area, and there's Gaza Junior School, and why did I do that? Because I liked my friends, and also wanted to buy their sweets and ice creams, because they're much cheaper there in Gaza than in Chipinga. So I used to buy pear drops, you know, for a cent, 1 Rhodesian cent. It was a big copper like this. That was a lot of money, man, for a child. That was a fortune. I remember now, I could buy a big bag of pear drops like this, 50 pear drops for a cent, 50, 50, 50 in Gaza. I remember the quarter cent, 1/4 cent ice creams. They were lollies and Lion's Mate. And then they got rid of the quarter cent and they had a half cent now, half cent. So if I found a 1 cent, that was already four ice creams or later on two ice cream. Milk was half a cent. You know, those packets. I can't remember the volume now, but it was like a square packet of milk. 1 cent Maltabella. It was like caramella, or later called Maltabella, but caramella at the start. Oh, that was delicious. The Rhodesian government made it compulsory that every single child had one for break time. And we just tear out these little stamps, little coupons, and pay for it that way. But I love my Pro Nutro.
Yeah, very
Mini meal
neutral.
porridge was even better. And freshly made, the maid would make it the best. My mom as well was brilliant. And put fresh milk, like creamy milk and brown sugar.
Yeah.
Goodness, and you'll be getting, because it's hot, it's steam, and you get from the side of the bowl and you'll be eating. It's delicious. And you go down and get Lobel's bread, and it's fresh from the Lobel's. I don't know if you remember it, John. The Lobel's
Mm, mm,
owned by a Greek couple and their children, and a lovely couple. And they baked up the most beautiful bread, apart from their Greek style
mm,
bread, the Lobel's
mm.
bread as well. And we buy it like hot, and sun jam and syrup, or getting, I don't know what. You go down to the get some chips, which they call their French fries or chips, and you put them in that hot Lobel's bread, and you eat the whole loaf.
Yeah, yeah,
But I loved sun jam, in the tin. Oh, the sun
yeah,
jam, my favorite,
yeah.
fresh, and margarine, the stalk margarine, and then the syrup, and the fresh cheese in Chipinga. The cheese factories were still there when I arrived, and I used to often go and visit them by myself. My mom had a friend in there. They just let me in, and school trips. Oh, I never forget that.
That
And
was great cheese. Yeah.
yeah, and then I remember the corn curls. Excuse my pronunciation. The corn curls, the custard creams, penny cools, the fried eggs. Where, as I mentioned earlier, fresh fried eggs every day from our chickens, but also fly nets. My father went out with his butterfly net and caught all the fly nets when they came out in the rains, like in their millions. And he'd be sitting there taking off the wings and then fry them up. And they were delicious, actually, in a pot of
Mm,
oil. Absolutely delicious. And then drain the oil in a sieve.
mm,
Fresh vegetables, the steaks, sausages are, but also the fish, the bream. I used to catch some bream in the stream and also the Chipinga Dam. Whilst it was still safe to visit there, now as the war escalated, it became impossible. But I used to catch bream and the bottlenose fish. That was delivered in the butchery my mom used to buy. And that was quite tasty, but a bit oily for me, but all right, quite tasty. The braais, outdoor braais all the time. The smell of that wood and the meat brine, nothing like biltong. But also, I'd like to say, because I was friends with the nannies and gardeners' children, we used to go down and they'd share their food, as is their African culture. And
yeah.
I remember the tasty, lovely, tasty salty nyama and the moriwo, which is, like the spinach, but salty, and the sadza. And you'd eat that with your hands, forget a spoon. You eat it with, oh my goodness. And you feel like strong after you've had some sadza, you feel proper strong. But I also liked lacto, which is the buttermilk. They call it buttermilk this side, but it's lacto. The In terms of drinks, I liked cream soda was my favorite.
Yeah, mine
And
too.
also liked, was it? Yeah.
Yeah.
I also liked cherry plum, Coca-Cola, Sharon sweets. I like to wear my tekkies. Usually, the tekkies with the ankle, like basketball tekkies, and my flip-flops. I like those as well. I didn't have any veldskoens as a child, only as an adult. But I can just continue with some of the dogs we had, and then my parents, and then round it off with something on my books. Um, so my father had Bentley, the dog, but he was brought down from Greendale with us. But then he announced that he would be rescuing Present was a Labrador cross boxer, and he didn't. He had three legs which he could walk on, but the fourth leg was like shriveled because he had a massive abscess in that leg. And my father saved him, but he still ran like the wind. And I remember in Chipinga seeing two-legged dogs as well. They could still run around. The aging Bentley, though, the dog, my father's dog, was obviously needing a companion. And normally you get a puppy when you know the older one hasn't got long left. Unfortunately, Bentley had a very cruel death from a pack of dogs that were marauding or prowling around Chipinga at night. And they dragged him through this fence, of our property. And it was terrible. So these dogs, they were, I'll tell you, they were, not being kept properly by their owners, and they were going around killing other dogs in Chipinga. So there were threats to shoot the pack unless they were leashed, and thereafter they were sort of controlled. But poor old Bentley was killed. There's another incidence of a police dog biting a next door neighbor's child's face. But mind you, I remember going to their house and the child was going too close to that dog, to the fence, of that where that dog was. You got to be a bit careful with some of these, The police constable then shot that dog because it had bitten the child's face. We obviously looked after him and didn't take him anywhere near other dogs because we were afraid of what might happen from what happened to Bentley. But I regard Present, and I wrote a book about him, Present, the three-legged dog, that he was fantastic because he guarded us against the insurgents, Makandangas, and he was very brave in the sense that he had no fear against grass, snakes, or cobras. I remember him challenging an Egyptian cobra, and it coming right up, and he'd get just outside of its reach of its strikes. So I'll never forget that. And he'd always scare the snakes away because when we walked, there were plenty of snakes there in Chipinga, plenty in the veld. And they'd come into our garden as well. They'd come for the chickens, big snakes. And he, as Present as well, was also so brave, the dog. He would go down, peering down the edge of enormous whirlpools. And these were colossal whirlpools in the stream that was feeding the Chipinga Municipal Dam. And the water was like racing down like a huge, how would you say, like a bath plug sink. And if you fell down as a child, it would be the end of you. And he would stand on the edge and look down, his legs spread, and in a way, look back at us and look at there and look back at us so we wouldn't go near too close to this whirlpool. And there were lots of them. Present, though, was also, when we were away, we were in another house after my parents' separation, and there was a burglary. And Present was hit with an axe on his back after the robbers broke in to the second rented house, and that was Mr. Venter. Mr. Venter rented out a house just down from the veterinary house, just off Moody Street. It was next door to the Klopper's house, where Betsy Kloppers lived, my friend, whom I'm still a friend with today. And Present was incredibly, despite having three legs, he survived that axe strike, which I don't know how any other dog could have, to be honest. He quickly healed. The dog-to-dog blood transfusions, though. Now, my father, although they separated my parents, he was still working as a vet in Chipinga, so you'd still have to, get hold of Present or ask my mum to bring Present around for a dog-to-dog blood transfusion. What do I mean? Well, unlike us humans, a dog can, apparently, according to my father, doesn't have blood groups, so it can donate one of its blood to another dog without a problem. And he literally connects Present, his leg or arm, to the other dog through a transfusion and save dogs dying of biliary, usually biliary, which is a tick-borne infection, or car accident victims. And Present would have no ill effects, so he'd be regularly bled, in a sense. he was an amazing dog. And he lived until a very old age. We had him all the way into Harare, Zimbabwe. My father was a vet, and he had some animal health inspectors as well. I remember John Henry was one of them, and his son was also John Henry Jr., whom I played with. But unfortunately, John Henry was ambushed coming back from his farm, back into Chipinga, and he died. So many did die in the war. Um, but my father, he was a vet, but he wasn't very patient with animals, and that was unfortunate. And that put me off, unfortunately, ever becoming a vet. Um, so my father was a vet, but he also served as a cook in the army. And as I said earlier, as a veterinary protection detail in the army vehicles on the dip duties because they had to dip all the cattle, at the various municipal dips as well, because, for the rural cattle, because of the foot and mouth disease.
Mm.
Um,
I wanted to ask you though, before we go, did you ever know Dr. John Condi, who lived in Rolfe Valley near Greendale? He was head of the veterinary department and did his he was also a fellow of the Royal College of Veterinary Surgeons and did his thesis on foot and mouth disease. They lived in Rolfe
yes,
Valley, they're just down from Chisipiti Shopping Centre.
I've
Uh,
never been to his house, but
Condi's.
my mother would often speak of him. Yes, my mother would
Okay,
speak of him
okay.
often. Because when
Uh,
when they finally separated and divorced, we went up to Salisbury in 1979 to stay in Hatley House, North Avenue, and from there Avondale, and then from there Vainona. And that sort of concludes my talk on Chipinga. So,
okay,
yeah, yeah.
fantastic.
Uh, please, have a look at my books, and I've
Yeah,
sent you book covers, and at the bottom of that, I've sent you my articles. I've also written in addition to my books on Chipinga. Yeah.
yeah. No, thank you so much, Ross. We've got uh, at almost an hour.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it. You brought back lots of memories, brother.
All right. Cheers. All right. Thanks.